41 years ago, I was born in Los Angeles, California. My mother lived in Riverside with her family. Her father was Mexican and grew up on the border of Mexico. Her mother was Sicilian and grew up part of the time in Sicily. And they got together, and my mother was born in Japan. They made a couple of moves and ended up in California. My father is Black and Turkish, and his mother is from Arkansas, and his father from Louisiana, and he was born in Arkansas, moved a couple of times, and ended up in California. My parents met, fell in love, had me, and then were not prepared.
Yeah, I was really excited with your father. We were both excited to have you. It was suggested that we go to the chaplain at the base and talk to him. And he suggested that we go around and see other couples that are in our situation, and which would be poor, basically, and see how they're living and with their child or out of wedlock or whatever. So we went and did that, and that was really hard for me because I knew that I wanted more for you. My father sent me away. He sent me to Los Angeles. It was a home for unwedded mothers. When he sent me, I didn't tell Bobby. I didn't know how to say, I don't think that I want to get married, and I don't think that I want this relationship to last. That I'll either raise her on my own or put her up for adoption. Well, adoption hadn't really come up until my father found out. When he found out, he was like, she's going up for adoption, simple as that. We're not doing this. Your mom and I have raised our kids. We had our children already. So that was really hard for me. And then he sent me away. And then towards the end, my mother had suffered a stroke while I was pregnant with you. I came home and I saw my mom and I spent some time with her. And at that point, everybody pretty much found out that I was pregnant, which is not a big deal for me. At the time, my father wasn't even really talking to me. He wouldn't even sit in the same room with me. I was so excited to be a mom. I just was, but it would have been hard. And I know there are a lot of people who choose to raise their child, but I don't know. I was still so naive in so many ways. I saw a lot in me that I didn't like at all. I really needed to grow up, Rhea. I needed to grow up, and it was irresponsible what I did, or what we did. But I see God's hand now in it, especially with Bobby. I think there was a lot of things going on at the time that I didn't realize with him, that he was doing things that I didn't know he was doing. Maybe about 6 to 8 months after I returned from having you. And he said, why didn't you contact me? Why didn't you tell me? I would have kept her. I would have raised her with my mom. I said I couldn't have that for her. She needed 2 parents.
Oh, when I first found out about you, Bobby called me from the Air Force Base. I keep forgetting the name of it, but he told me that Charlotte was pregnant and he wanted to marry her, but her father told her she wasn't gonna marry a nigger. So he sent her to Los Angeles to a home for unwed mothers, and she stayed there until she had the baby. And when I found that out, I was going to have my cousin to go and take me down there to see if I could get her out, because Bobby said he didn't know the address or anything, so that didn't work out. So when you were finally born, Charlotte did get in touch with Bobby and told him that he has a daughter and that she had given her up for adoption.
I had you, and you were just beautiful. You were wonderful. But I got to spend 3 days with you in the hospital before they came and got you. And the social worker came to me and talked to me and said, you don't have to put her up for adoption. You can keep her. And I said, I want to keep her, but if I do, it's going to be my mom and I on our own. My father won't have any part of it, and I can't do that to my mother. I remember the day that they came to get you, and I was just beside myself, and you were beside yourself too. You were crying, and when I handed you over, that's what it was like. It was really hard.
By the time I was 6 months old, I had already been placed in one home, but the couple who was adopting me were getting a divorce, and my mother specified that she wanted me to be with a two-parent home. And then I ended up with my current parents. My current parents who adopted me were very excited to have a child of their own. My mother had previously had 2 children, unfortunately had to give them up for adoption. She married my father. She had gone through cancer, had a hysterectomy, was no longer able to have children, so they decided to adopt me.
We couldn't have any. And so Dad said one day, he was at work and he calls me up and he said, well, why don't you just call the adoption agency? And I said, I don't think that they would.
We had a lot of people's children and became de facto our kids. Our next door neighbor, your mom's good friend, Alva, she knew that we love kids. And she said, why don't you all adopt? And it hit us like a thunderbolt. We had some really complicated things happen along the way. First was that after we started the adoption process, I got orders to go to North Dakota, and they said, you don't have enough time to get it done. I said, yes, you do. Along the way, Riverside County, for some reason, they had some economic problems, and they decided they were going to reduce a lot of the social workers at the adoption agencies, and that would have stopped everything. So all the prospective adopted parents got together, started a protest and a movement, and it got to the point where we had TV stations from LA came and we interviewing people. We were marching, and we put so much heat on the county that they decided to not lay off anyone from the adoption agency.
My mother became a homemaker and my father was in the military, so we lived in North Dakota, Northern California, the Philippines, Illinois, and Maryland.
It was very hard for me. Yeah, I wasn't sure what I was going to do at that point.
I didn't want you to get older, like you was 15, 16, and then to find out. Because we had people with big mouths on both sides of the family. And they had said something. And we thought, both of us thought it was best to let you know that you was adopted from the get-go. Then we noticed you was artistic, very artistic. And you was 3 years old, and you was in preschool, and you did a whole book all by yourself.
When I graduated high school, I had my first daughter. I got married and my husband joined the military and we moved to Texas. That's when I began the journey to look for my biological parents. I had always wanted to find them, and I had even fantasized about what it would be like if they were in my life. I'd even drawn pictures over and over of a beautiful woman that I thought might look like my mother.
California laws were very, very strict in releasing biological parentage information. And I looked up North Dakota rules, found out they were a lot more liberal. And we got an attorney, and the rest was history.
We found my mother in Ohio, living with her current husband, and I had 4 siblings. On my 21st birthday, we went out to visit.
Well, when that day came, when they called, I was at Monet's, which is a small Italian grocery store, and I had my kids with me, all 4 of them. And I remember Tommy and Josiah were little, but Tommy darted away from me and he was running, and I told Jennifer to go get him. And then I got the call and I was like, hello, hello. And then she told me, and I couldn't even believe it. I mean, I was really excited. And then I told my mom and dad, and my mom said that she had been praying for you all those years. I think he was happy. I think he was happy that the outcome, that everything, came out, everything happened, there was no, tragedy or anything, that you wanted to see me. And I think you felt good about that.
And after continuing to search, 3 years later, I found my biological father, who happened to be also living in Texas. He and his mother moved to Texas about the same time that my family moved to Texas, and we had just never met. We were living an hour away from each other, and finally, I was able to reunite.
Bobby came down here in 2005, and I told him I wanted him to get those papers together and try to find his daughter. And he did. And so when we heard from them again, they sent a little information about you. Some way they had your phone number, and that phone number was on the paper. So that's when I called you. And you didn't answer your phone, so I left you a message. And then when you finally did call me, I told you who I was and everything, and gave you my address. And you told me you couldn't come down until that Saturday because you would have to have your husband to drive you down there. And so you did come that Saturday. And we've been close ever since. That was truly a blessing because I don't even like Texas. And when I decided to, after I had to take that early retirement, I knew I couldn't live in California on a fixed income. And I had a niece and a nephew here in Texas. So I said, well, I'll go to Texas. That'll put me closer to Arkansas. So I had no idea that if I ever found you, that you would be in Texas. But you were always in my prayers. So you are very special, and you will always be loved.